A Step into the Past Volume 16 Chapter 11. Book 16 Chapter 11, Avenging the Great Enmity. Xiang Xiaolong and Shan Rou started their ferocious attack. From their vantage point up in the roof, they rapidly shot down more than 10 men before Teng Yi and the rest forced open the gates and rushed into the manor. The two were puzzled when they did not see Tian Dan escape from inside the building. They rapidly climbed up the roof and entered the room through the skylight. There, they quickly found a secret tunnel that Tian Dan and his men used to escape. They plunged in immediately, giving chase. The tunnel was wide and straight, reinforced with wooden pillars and rammed earth panels. It even had ventilation ducts, demonstrating its meticulous construction. The two of them did not dare to light a torch and could only grope forward using the wall as a guide. They soon reached the other end of the tunnel, realizing that it actually emptied out into the fringe of the forest grove. Right outside the grove stood the little wharf. The fishing boats had long been scuttled. 10 overhuman shadows were escaping upriver along the bank. Xiang Xiaolong fired a signal rocket before the two of them gave chase. After a mad sprint, 6 of the opponents fell back, drew their swords and attacked towards them. How would Xiang Xiaolong have the patience to dicker with them? He drew out his flying needles, waved his hands and shot out the needles under the cover of night. The 6 men fell to the ground en masse. The remaining 7 enemies did not anticipate that their 6 comrades could not even delay them by 1 second. With a shout of command, they left the river bank and scattered towards a small hill in the jungle by the river. Xiang Xiaolong fired another 2 needles, instantly felling 2 more enemies. Shan Rou's bloodlust was kindled and she threw her flying dagger. An enemy who had just started climbing the hill was hit in the back and tumbled down. At this moment, Shan Rou recognized one of the men racing up the hill as Tian Dan. Strength surged into her legs from God knows where as she overtook Xiang Xiaolong, flying up the hill like an arrow, catching up with the enemy. Xiang Xiaolong feared for her safety and gathering his energy, chased up the hill. The sound of clashing blades rang out. Shan Rou's delicate shouts interspersed with the enemy's blood-curdling shrieks. However, peace and tranquility was quickly restored. By the time Xiang Xiaolong reached the hilltop, the 2 fighters had already separated. They were both covered with blood. Fresh blood flowed from Shan Rou's left arm and right shoulder. Tian Dan was holding a long sword facing Shan Rou. His diaphragm was heaving up and down. His face was pale as a corpse under the moonlight. Tian Dan took a glimpse at Xiang Xiaolong and laughed bitterly, saying, "Bravo, you have finally caught me." Shan Rou said vehemently, "Tian Dan, do you know who I am?" Hoofbeats sounded. Teng Yi and the rest arrived with torches, surrounding the 3 people in a circle. Zhao Ji shrieked and flew down her horse, viciously shouting, "When you put the 3 generations of my family to death, did you ever think there would be this day?" Shan Rou said icily, "He is mine. I want to kill him with my own hands." Xiang Xiaolong went to Zhao Ji's side and whispered, "Let your sister Rou do it." With a hua sound, Zhao Ji leaned into Xiang Xiaolong's shoulder and started crying agitatedly. Tian Dan remained calm and laughed loudly, saying, "I Tian Dan have killed countless people in my lifetime. How can I remember whom I have killed before? Xiang Xiaolong, you are good. I Tian Dan submit to you." Reversing his blade, he slashed his neck and fell backwards, dying instantly. Shan Rou's entire body began to shiver and she knelt down. Zhao Ji rushed over and held her tightly. The 2 women cried bitterly on each other's shoulders. Their cries resonated through the whole forest. This category-defining, ruthless and ambitious person had finally perished. Teng Yi jumped off his horse, cut off Tian Dan's head and shouted mightily, "Let us go." Xiang Xiaolong was numb in his heart. It was a feeling that was hard to describe. On the one hand he was pleased that Shan Rou, her sisters, and Teng Yi had avenged the extermination of their family. He had also accomplished an impossible goal himself. But seeing this historically celebrated character committing suicide in front of him gave him a sense of loss. Still, this had all become an unchangeable piece of history. When Xiao Pan ascends the throne and the evil Lu Bue had been killed, he would leave this warring Central Plains and live the peaceful secluded life he had always dreamed of. He would never again return to the Central Plains. Can't help but think of RWX in the Dongfang Bubai movie. Where there is man, there is strife. Where can you retreat to? They returned to their ships and set sail back to Shaochun. That evening the whole party drank themselves silly and slept all day the next day before waking at different times. Xiang Xiaolong came to the cabin with a hangover. The three ladies were chatting in a low voice. They looked happy and at ease. Zhao Ji gleefully called out, "Xiaolong, Sister Ro is willing to return with us to Xianyang." Xiang Xiaolong was extremely pleased and replied, "That day you really were lying to me." Shan Ro displayed an unreasonable yet lovely look and said, "Told you I was bluffing long ago. I'm still angry when I think about it." "You were totally unaffected." Ji Yanran laughed and said, "Sister Ro should not be angry. Our husband keeps everything in his heart. His words are hard but his heart is soft. You must not blame him." Shan Ro replied disdainfully, "He is your husband, what does that have to do with Shan Ro?" She then giggled lovably and gave him a sweet smile. Everyone knew her disposition and naturally nobody took her words for real. They sailed upriver. The ship moved slowly. They took a day more returning than they did setting out, eventually reaching Shaochun. Xiang Xiaolong did not stop but continued sailing towards Chengyang as he had promised Madame Zhuang that he would visit her for few days as he passed by Dian on his way home. After disembarking, they rendezvoused with their special forces troops and headed south towards Dian. Madame Zhuang and her son was accompanied by the freshly minted General Dong Luzi. He commanded 8,000 Chu soldiers and had recovered most of the territory occupied by the rebel army. As the people of Dian found out that Zhuang Beiyi had returned, they revolted in large numbers and joined the new Dian army. This army grew to about 20,000 people and they joined hands with the Chu army. They were presently besieging the Dian capital Jaos. Jaos sits on a plateau with its back against a mountain, truly an impregnable stronghold. Since the city had adequate water and food, the Allied army had not been able to defeat the defenders and had even lost close to 1,000 men. Witnessing the demise of the Yelang king, all the vassal states dispatched armies in the restorative effort. The Qilan king even led the soldiers himself, forcing entry into the Yelang capital and setting up a new ruler before returning in triumph. From then, Yelang people were never again strong enough to bully the neighboring vassal states. As Xiang Xiaolong and his men reached the Allied army camp at Jaos, the besieging soldiers had just suffered a defeat. Casualties littered the field, piled on one another. When Lu Wuxin and Madame Zhuang knew that Xiang Xiaolong had come as promised, they were overjoyed at the unexpected news and ushered everyone into the camp. Lu Wuxin wanted to organize a feast to welcome the party from their journey but was refused tactfully by Xiang Xiaolong. They held a meeting immediately at the commander's tent, looking for ways to defeat the city. After listening to Lu Wuxin detail Jaos's terrain and environment, Xiang Xiaolong calmly said, "The most formidable characteristic of the city is that it is set against the mountain. We will use this to our advantage. I can guarantee that we will be in the city within 3 days." Madame Zhuang, Lu Wuxin, and the rest of the high-ranking officers all bugged their eyes in disbelief. That night, Xiang Xiaolong and his party marched through the night and arrived at the rocky mountain behind Jaos before setting camp and organizing his soldiers. The next morning after Xiang Xiaolong and Teng Yi had thoroughly reconnoitered the mountain, they identified 5 routes of approach and sent men up to install metal hoops at regular intervals and to deploy climbing equipment. These were all basic techniques taught to all the elite special forces. With the installations complete, at nightfall, Xiang Xiaolong and his party used the climbing equipment and specially installed rock steps to quickly ascend to the undulating and overgrown mountaintop. The 7 to 8 mile long Jaos city wall stretched in both directions from beneath their feet. Lu Wuxin was marshalling his army, besieging the city night and day, drawing the attention of the rebel army. War cries and the sound of stone-piercing projectiles rang out unceasingly. Ji Yanran and the two ladies also reached the summit at this moment. They crouched beside Xiang Xiaolong and Teng Yi while delicately catching their breath. Where they were, it was only about 700 feet from the bottom. The average person would be shocked when looking down, but it was child's play for the elite special forces who regularly trained on the moon-reaching mountain near the Wu family ranch. That mountain was 3 times the height of this mountain. Teng Yi issued a single command and the 4 especially skilled men Jing Shan, Wu Shu, Wu Ji, and Dan Chuan immediately obseiled down using the climbing equipment. After finding a foothold, they hammered in an iron loop and installed a new climbing apparatus. Their equipment was built according to the designs of 21st century climbing experts. Resting on the overlapping loops at their waists, they glided down as fast as lightning and as easily as if they were playing a game. The 4 men quickly reached the undergrowth at the foot of the mountain. They were only separated from the south-facing rear wall of the city by a moat. The sentries on top of the wall had all gone to the other 3 wall segments to help in defense. Only the few sentry towers were manned. Moreover, it was difficult for the sentries to see into the pitch-black area beneath the walls. Teng Yi issued another order and the Wu family special forces followed their usual drill, sliding down under the cover of the hillside trees as well as the darkness. At this moment, Jing Shan and the rest of the 4 men had installed the device to traverse the moat. Ji Yanran gazed at the ant-like civilian conscripts in the city and said, "From a cursory glance we can tell that this regime is maintained only through military force. The residents are all being forced into labor with whips." Everyone looked closely and realized it was just as Ji Yanran had observed. The city residents were merely carrying materials under close watch and the threat of whips. They all had an expression of bitter resignation. This moment, a mounted patrol came from one end of the wall. The patrolmen were carrying wind lamps scanning the bottom of the wall and the mountain. Everyone had a fright and hurriedly hid themselves. Jing Shan and others crouched at the foot of the wall. What was most worrisome were the 4 moat crossing contraptions. As long as the other party was alert, they would surely spot them. Even though the contraptions had been camouflaged with a dark non-reflective grease, but they were not invisible after all. Xiang Xiaolong was born quick-witted. As the patrolman's lamplight was almost on the contraptions, he puckered his lips and emitted a shrill sound like a night owl. The patrolmen naturally raised their lamps towards the mountain, but were unable to see anything unusual. When they turned back, they had passed the contraptions and rapidly rode away. Everyone was covered in a sheet of cold sweat. Shan Ro came over and said, "At least this chap has some creative methods." Jing Shan and the rest shot out their grappling hooks, clasped onto the wall and climbed up rapidly, agile as monkeys. They split up to take care of the sentries in the towers. The Wu family warriors crossed the moat and started climbing the wall in groups. Their movements were nimble and quick, demonstrating astonishing efficiency. Seeing them, Xiang Xiaolong felt a sense of pride. Even the 21st century special forces may not be at this level. By this time, close to 1,000 men have descended to the foot of the mountain. Those who had crested the wall took out their crossbows and guarded the parapets. I am guessing that when they rendezvoused with the soldiers near Shaochun earlier, it was with the main body of their army, not just the 300 men that Teng Yi brought to Shaochun. Teng Yi chuckled softly, "Second brother is itching for a fight. I will go first." Xiang Xiaolong replied, "Let's go together." When Xiang Xiaolong and his party had reached the top of the wall, the 1,000+ Wu family elite warriors had split into 4 groups, preparing to attack the wall in both directions and also towards the city center. Teng Yi fired a signal rocket to notify Lu Wuxin that they had penetrated the city successfully. After Xiang Xiaolong had assigned people to defend all the entry points on the wall, he led the 3 women and 500 soldiers towards the city center. Teng Yi was responsible for capturing the wall. Bugles sounded. All of a sudden, the warriors shouted as one, "The city is breached! The city is breached!" The conscripted defenders in the city were startled. The sound of killing rose to the heavens. Looking to the back wall, they saw a large flag atop a tall post inscribed with the word, "Shuang." Several hundred soldiers flew down from the walls in attack. Those residents who were forced into labor cried out at the same time and threw down the firewood, stone, and other materials that they were carrying. They dispersed and escaped, even echoing, "The city is breached! The city is breached!" The breakdown in order and discipline spread like an epidemic. Xiang Xiaolong and his contingent swarmed down the stairs on the city walls like locusts. Crossbow bolts flew like rain. The enemy soldiers fell to the ground in droves. In the blink of an eye, they had obtained control of the rear city gate and the nearby square and buildings. Xiang Xiaolong ordered his men to open the city gate and let down the drawbridge. At the same time, he commanded men to lay out a defense grid on the rooftops of buildings. The enemies who rushed forward were all driven back in a hail of bolts. Their own men flowed in endlessly through the city gate. They even brought with them lances, tall shields, and other heavy weaponry. Teng Yi took advantage of the enemy's chaos and swept through each section of the northwestern wall. Lu Wuxin's besieging troops attacked the east gate with all their might, concentrating the enemy's attention there. The soldiers who had occupied the northwestern wall used their superior ground to shoot down the enemy soldiers who were rushing about trying to hinder the attackers. Xiang Xiaolong saw that the timing was opportune and waved his arm in a signal. Row after row of Wu family warriors raised their lances and advanced towards the three gates in the east, west, and north under the cover of archery fire. The battle was pitched and desperate. The Wu family warriors on the wall shouted loudly once again, "Those who abandon their weapons and squat on the ground are not to be killed, those who abandon their weapons and squat on the ground are not to be killed." Repeating endlessly. This was of course a scheme that Xiang Xiaolong came up with based on modern psychological warfare techniques he had learned. Many of the residences were on fire. Raging flames rose from the rooftops, spreading to the surrounding buildings. The whole city was bathed in the orange glow of the fire. Thick smoke covered the sky. The moon and stars were obscured and dim. The defending soldiers discarded their weapons in large numbers. They joined the city residents in squatting at the corners of the city walls, squares, and thoroughfares. Their morale had dissipated. The insides of the city had turned into a chaotic battleground. The Wu family warriors organized themselves in tight units and continuously expanded the ground under their control. The warriors up on the city walls progressed even more swiftly. The resisting enemies were slaughtered until their blood ran like rivers. Corpses littered the parapets. The wounded were rapidly moved to the south wall to be treated by medical specialists. The entire operation was clear and orderly. This is the first time the special forces have demonstrated their prowess in a large-scale campaign. It was truly out of the ordinary. Under the cover of a company of archers and shield men, Xiang Xiaolong led the 3 ladies and the 18 guardians towards the inner castle. At this point, the west and north gates had fallen into their control. The gates had been opened and the horses and men of the allied army were rushing into the city. The enemy soldiers defending the inner castle resisted bitterly. Xiang Xiaolong and his party threw themselves into attack, rushing left and slashing right. They broke through the inner castle gate shortly, and attacked towards the palace. The enemy soldiers knew they had lost and discarded their weapons, surrendering by the lot. Xiang Xiaolong instructed his men to concentrate the surrendered enemy soldiers in one location under guard. Lu Wuxin and Zhuang Kong were leading 1,000 elite troops and they rushed in. Once the two armies met up, they swept through the city even more quickly. In less than the time it took for a cup of tea to cool, they had attacked into the palace. The interior of the palace was a mess, and cries of grief shook the heavens. The palace women and children were huddled in a group, trembling and asking for forgiveness. The garrison soldiers were all kneeling in surrender. Xiang Xiaolong took pity on them and found men to console them and look after them. Pang! The door of the main palace hall was forced open. They saw about 30 enemy officers and soldiers in a circle with their swords raised, protecting a youth wearing royal robes and a crown. The situation was bleak. The sounds of crying and killing outside gradually subsided. It was clear that Zhao's city had fallen into the hands of the besieging soldiers. Xiang Xiaolong and his men gathered in front of the enemy soldiers in large numbers. More than 10 crossbows were aimed at the enemies at the center of the hall. Zhuang Kong bellowed, "Surrender immediately or be killed without mercy." Lu Wuxin moved close to Xiang Xiaolong and whispered, "This kid has done much evil, raping countless women. Death is too good for him." That youth in royal robes raised his head and yelled back, "I am Li Ling's son Li Qi. I will die before surrendering." Xiang Xiaolong forced a smile and said, "You know my preference. I'll let you take charge of this." Heaving a big sigh, he ushered the 3 ladies back out of the hall. Behind them, the sound of concentrated crossbow fire rang out along with the sound of wretched cries before gradually becoming silent again. It had taken 3 days to recover Jiao's. Xiang Xiaolong took his leave of Madame Zhuang, her son, the Yu sisters and others, all unwilling to be parted. They then hurried back to Xiangyang. It could be said that this trip to Chu had yielded them good results. Not only did they manage to kill Tian Dan, they had also helped Chu and Diane in big way. Nonetheless, because Su Xian's status was unknown and also because Prince Dan had been captured in Xianyang, everyone's feeling of triumph was greatly diminished. As they went through customs, their old friend Ngu personally invited them into the official building. Xiang Xiaolong saw that the Qin soldiers were all wearing a white sash on their arms and knew that things had turned for the worse. Sure enough, Ngu said in grief, Premier Su was seriously injured in an ambush and died en route back to Xianyang. A torrent of hate welled up in Xiang Xiaolong and gushed towards heaven. Lu Bue was certainly more malicious than a ravenous wolf. Just for a little personal gain, he had forgotten about Qin's overall situation. He would unscrupulously get rid of anything or anyone who got in his way. The 2 of them originally had no cause for enmity, only favor. Yet he wanted to kill him just because King Zhuangxiang, Zhu Ji, and Xiao Pan were close to him. Now he had used such a despicable method to kill Su Xian, it made him gnash his teeth in pain and hatred. Ngu sighed and said, "It has been confirmed that this was perpetrated by Lord Chun Shen. The Chu people have sent over Lord Chunshen's head and even offered to cede 5 cantons to parley for peace. But how could we let this go like this?" Xiang Xiaolong rode along with him, saying in pain, "If we proceed like this, we would have succumbed to Lu Bue's evil designs. Precisely, he is now using this critical situation to expand his powers. The true culprit for Premier Su's murder is Lu Bue. Lord Chun Shen was but a puppet under his strings." Ngu's countenance changed and he exclaimed, "What?" The next day, Xiang Xiaolong set off immediately for Xianyang. It was now 3 days into winter and the weather was bitter cold. Without realizing it, they had been away from Xianyang for 5 months. 18 days later, Xianyang finally appeared before their eyes. The elite special forces automatically returned to the Wu family ranch while Xiang Xiaolong, Teng Yi, Ji Yanran, the women, and the 18 guardians braced their weary bodies and returned to Xianyang. As they entered the city, they heard another piece of bad news: Lu Gong had fallen ill. The illness was caused by anger. The moment Su Xian's body returned to Xianyang, Lu Gong had cried violently over the corpse, collapsing on the spot. Since then he has been ill and has not risen. As one wave subsides, another rises. Xiang Xiaolong and his party rushed towards the commander-in-chief's residence. The moment he stepped in, he knew that something was wrong. The residence was filled with Wang Ling and other high-ranking officers, ministers, and Lu Gong's family. The sound of weeping permeated the place. While Xiang Xiaolong thought that Lu Gong had already passed away, Wang Ling pulled Xiang Xiaolong into the inner hall and said in deep grief, "Quick, go see the commander-in-chief one last time. He's been waiting for you, unwilling to take his last breath until you arrive." Hot tears flowed from Xiang Xiaolong's eye sockets. He suddenly realized that in reality, he not only looked upon Lu Gong as a venerable friend and superior, deep within his heart he had also started to treat Lu Gong as a close relative. He had developed the intimacy and reluctance to part as if a son to a father. Lu Gong was lying on a couch, his complexion as white as paper. His two eyes were tightly closed, and he breathed with difficulty. Xiao Pan stood at his side holding his hand. His expression was shockingly calm. Lu Danner knelt on his other side weeping bitterly. Two noble women who must be her seniors were looking after her. Jing Jun, Lord Chan Guen, Lord Chongping, Lu Bue, Guan Zongzi, Li Si, Lao Ai, and the rest were all there, standing outside the door. Everyone let out a happy expression when they saw Xiang Xiaolong. Lu Bue also displayed an appearance of happiness and embraced Xiang Xiaolong's shoulder, softly saying, "It's good that Xiaolong is back. Quickly go in and see the Commander-in-Chief one last time." Xiang Xiaolong really felt like slaughtering him then and there. As he was about to wrest himself out of the embrace, Lu Bue released him. Jing Jun rushed forward holding his brows and called out "third brother" and couldn't help turning hoarse and crying bitterly. Those who heard could not help but feel sad too. Xiao Pan's imposing body started and looking over, he saw Xiang Xiaolong. His eyes emitted a look of profound emotion but his expression was extraordinarily serene. He unhurriedly said, "Grand Tutor, please hurry in." The Lu Gong who was leaning on the couch let out an ah sound and awakened. Xiao Pan gravely ordered, "Please help Miss Danner outside." Lu Danner stood up and was about to protest when her legs gave way and she fainted into the bosom of the two noble women. Jing Jun rushed over and carried her out. Xiang Xiaolong came to the side of the couch. At this point only Xiao Pan and Xiang Xiaolong were in the room with Lu Gong. As Xiao Pan had not given permission, the others did not dare to enter. The only one who would dare to rush in was Lu Bue, but he had his own motives and chose to remain outside. Lu Gong ferociously opened his eyes and swept over the men. His face blushed red and he unexpectedly struggled to sit up. Xiang Xiaolong and Xiao Pan glanced at each other, both fearing the worst. They knew that he had seen Xiang Xiaolong and was using his last gasp of life. It would be hard to hold on after this. The two people helped him sit up. Hot tears flowed from the corners of Lu Gong's eyes and he rasped, "Was Su Xian killed by that treacherous thief?" Xiang Xiaolong nodded distressedly, his own tears falling uncontrollably. Lu Gong grasped their hands, one in each hand. With a trembling voice, he said into their ears, "Protect the crown prince. Kill the traitor. Avenge me and Su Xian. Remember this, remember." He then breathed his last, let go of their hands and passed away.